To speak advanced English, C2 English, proficiency level, you need to know modal verbs and all of the rules. And there's a lot of them, over 250 rules. But don't worry, all you've got to do is watch this video all the way to the end, and you will know all of the modal verb rules that you need to know for advanced English at a C2 proficiency level. First, let's look at the word can. Here's a man who has a very common ability. If you ask him, what is this ability? He would say, I can swim. So one of the main uses of can is for ability, but there's so much more to it than that. Let's start by looking at its basic form. Subject, can, then infinitive. I can swim. Now, we don't usually use can in the continuous form, but we can use it both for the present and future time. Look at the difference between these two. If you say, yes, I can swim, then that means this is something that I have the ability to do in general. I had it in the past, I have it now, I'll still have it in the future. That's the present use, but we can also use it for the future only. If I say, yes, I can go swimming with you, that means I have the ability to do this in the future. And can might sometimes be made past by using could instead. For example, I could swim when I was young, but I can't now. We'll look at this a lot more later. It's important to also know the negative form here. We could say, I cannot swim, and we could also say, I can't swim. The full form cannot is usually more formal than the contracted form can't. So be aware of when you're using it. If you're in a formal situation, maybe the full form cannot would be better. Informally, in general conversation, can't is much more normal. How about in the question form? Well, here we simply put can at the beginning. Can you swim? So we've looked at the form of can. Now let's look at the uses. What are the many different ways that we could use can? This lady goes to the reception because she wants to enter the gym. So she says to the receptionist, can I enter the gym? So let's look at this use and some other basic uses. The most basic use is for ability. I can lift heavy weights means I have the ability to do this. If something is generally true, we can use can. Lifting weights can give you back pain. So can here indicates that there is a general truth. It is possible that this will happen. With possibility, you can try to lift them if you like. This means it's possible to do it. There's nothing stopping you. As we've seen, we use it for requests. Can I enter the gym? And the request has an answer. And that's to do with permission. Can I enter the gym? Yes, you can. Or no, you can't. You don't have an ID card. Now let's look at some more advanced uses of can. And first, it's important to note there is a subtle difference between cannot, all as one word, or cannot separated into two words. If you say you cannot eat the food where it's all one word, that means it's not allowed. You cannot, it's not allowed. But if you separate the two, you cannot eat the food if you don't want to, then that might mean you could choose not to eat the food. Now in speech, it's very difficult to tell the difference, so you'll have to be very deliberate to separate the can and the not, if that's what you mean. You'd probably say something like this. You can not eat the food if you don't want to. Here I've got a difference in stress between the can and the not, which makes it clear that they are separate. So be aware this is an option when you're using cannot. Here's other advanced uses. When you start a question with can't, we often mean why can't or is it not possible? Look at the example here. Can't he eat the food? Here, can't he eat means why can't he eat the food? Can't he eat the food? What's the reason? It could also mean is it not possible to eat the food? When used with a raised tone, can in a question might represent an order instead. Listen to this. Can you stand in line, please? It's not really a question. It's actually an order, but we use can to make it a little bit more polite. But it's actually an order. Can't with a raised tone might indicate annoyance. If you say, "Can't you be quiet for just 1 minute?" You're probably saying that to a group of people who you have the permission to speak like that to, a group of people who are making lots of noise, you want them to be quiet, and you're in charge, so you have the right to give the order. "Can't you be quiet for just 1 minute? I'm annoyed by your noise. Please be quiet." There are some special ways that we can use can with the verb to be. Let's look at them now. Be careful when you're driving in this part of the world because the roads can be icy when it's cold. So when we use can in this way, we mean in some circumstances. The road can be icy in cold weather. In some circumstances, the road is icy when it's cold. We can also use can with to be for negative deduction, often in the place of must. It can't be safe to drive on that road, which really means I believe it is not safe. It must not be safe to drive on that road, but we often use can't for this particular reason. We don't use the positive form of can for deduction though. We wouldn't say they can be hiding in the trees if we mean there's a strong likelihood. So we use this in the negative form, but we don't use it in the positive form when we're trying to deduce what is true in the present. Now, there are thousands of other English rules to learn, and you can find lots of them on my Perfect English Grammar course. For more details, click the link in the video description below this video here. A special use of can is for surprise. Let's look at it now. These students have just got their exam results and they're so pleased with them. They say to each other, "Can you believe it? I can't believe it." So this use sounds a little bit like logical deduction, but it's actually just expressing extreme surprise. And we have certain phrases we use for this. Can you believe it? Which really means I'm really surprised. Also, it can't be true. Even though you know it is, you say it because you're surprised. You can't be serious. Even though you know they are serious, because you're surprised. Let's go on to the word could. How is it formed? This girl is trying to decide between bus and train. Eventually she thinks, well, because it's faster, I could take the train. So a common use of would is when you're working something out between different possibilities. But as with can, there's a lot more to could than that. We'll look at that in a moment, but let's start with the basics and the form. So again, we have subject, could, and infinitive. I could travel by train. Now with could, it is possible to have a continuous form with the verb to be afterwards. I could be travelling by train is absolutely fine. Now could plus infinitive, also like can refer to the present or the future. I could travel by train, well that means generally there's a possibility of it happening at any time. But if I say I could travel by train tomorrow, then I'm referring to the future and a future possibility. With advanced uses of could, we often use could, then to have, and the past participle, particularly when referring to the past, in this way. I could have travelled by train. And here we're placing the meaning in the past. And we'll look at how we can use could with the past in a minute. In the negative form, could not, I could not travel by train, or couldn't, I couldn't travel by train. And as with cannot and can't, the full form could not is usually more formal than the contracted form couldn't. In the question form, could goes at the beginning, then the subject, then the infinitive. Could you travel by train? Or in the negative form, couldn't you travel by train? We can also separate could and not with the subject. Could you not travel by train? If you say couldn't, then that's more likely to be used than could not in a question. Now, you have to be careful with could not, because if you say could you not, there's a danger that it can sound angry. and impatient in some situations, so be sure to use it in the right place. There are lots of different uses of could. Let's look at them now. This boy is thinking about when he was younger, and he remembers, I could touch my toes when I was younger. So just as can shows ability in the present, could shows ability in the past. I could touch my toes when I was a child. There are some complications we'll come to in a moment. We can also use could for polite requests. Could you help me with my homework? It's more polite than saying, help me with my homework, or I want help with my homework. Possibility comes through could. We could see the beach from our hotel room. That means it was possible to see the beach. Again, it's in the past. And for suggested actions. The front door is locked. You could try the back door. This man is helping the boy fix his bike. And when someone asks the boy, what did he say? The boy replies, he said he could fix my bike. Other basic uses are for reported speech when you're reporting can, which was said in the present. So if someone says, like we saw in the video, I can help you fix your bicycle, when reported, this becomes, he said he could help me fix my bicycle. Now some advanced uses of could. We can use could for permission in the past. They could play in the park when they were younger, but now they are too old. So could here indicates that they were given permission. Have you been to a park? It often has a sign saying, this is for children under the age of 5 or under the age of 12. If you're over that age, you don't have permission. So if you're older than that, you look back and think, well, I had permission in the past. I could play in the park in the past, but now I don't. This woman is thinking about her childhood and she's feeling a bit miserable because she could play in the park when she was a child, but now she's too old. We can also use could for deduction, both in the present and the past. Look at the slight difference though. With the present deduction, we say this, I can't see them, they could be hiding. With past deduction, they aren't in the park anymore. The parents have called them home. Did you see the difference? With present deduction, use could be followed by the ing form. For past deduction, could have followed by the past participle. And we can also use could for the hypothetical future. This is for actions or states that will not happen. Something that was planned, now it can't happen, but you're hypothesizing, imagining if it had still been possible to do it. Look at the example. We can't go on a holiday next week because I have to work. It could have been a wonderful time. So here, it could have been a wonderful time is actually referring to the future. I expected to go. Now I can't go. And I'm thinking about what if I could go? Well, it could have been a wonderful time when I get there in the future. And we could also use could for criticism for something not done. Look at the example. You could have told me that you can't go on holiday next week. What does this really mean? You could have told me. That means you should have told me. Why didn't you tell me? I expected you to tell me. But we can summarize it by saying you could have told me, which has that meaning. I'm criticizing you because you didn't tell me. One difficulty is choosing between can, could, and able to. Let's find out how to choose. It's the end of the school year, so the students are saying to each other, we can go on holiday. We saw earlier in this lesson that we can use can for present ability and permission when it's general. We can go on holiday. We can also say we are able to go on holiday. Able to after the verb to be. Are able to comes from be able to. Now, if we want to form the present perfect, we can't use the modal verbs here. We have to use be able to. We have been able to go on holiday. To qualify an ability or permission with another modal, we also use be able to. We might be able to go on holiday. We wouldn't say we might can go on holiday or we might could go on holiday. It has to be able to. Now let's look at could, because this is where confusion often comes up. With general ability, could can be the past of can for these reasons, for ability and permission. We could get half-price tickets for the bus when we were children. So this again is looking at a general situation in the past, the ability that we had in the past. But that's general. What about when we get a bit more specific? When we get a bit more specific, we need to use able to. Be able to can be used in the past tense too. We were able to get half-price tickets. But when we're looking at specific instances of ability, don't use could. Instead, use be able to in the past. So don't say, we could go on holiday last week. That's a specific instance of ability or permission. No, instead here we say, we were able to go on holiday last week, because it's specific to one particular instance. This rule only applies in the positive form of could. When it comes to the negative, couldn't, then you can choose either. You can say, we couldn't go on holiday last week, or we weren't able to go on holiday last week. And now for some special uses of could. This man looks very upset about something happening at his workplace. And he says, I could never have imagined this happening. So what might have happened in the video? Well, I think this person had just seen his manager. And the manager said, you're fired. And that is why the man responded, I could never have imagined this happening. There was no warning that it was going to come. And we can use could never have to say you were unable to predict something. Another special use is with the phrase, I tried how I could. I tried how I could to stop him. Look here at this lady who's gone to the manager and she's begging him, please don't fire him. But the manager says no. So when the lady goes back to the man, she says, I tried how I could to stop him. What it means is with all my ability. Another special use is with the phrase I could not, because sometimes in old-fashioned English, it actually means I don't. As in this example here, my uncle has been released from prison, though I could not wish to see him at present. Now here, I could not wish really means I don't. It's an old-fashioned way of saying it. You don't need to say it yourself, but you may come across it particularly when you're reading. And another special use is could have, followed by the past participle, can be used for imagining what was possible in the past. This lady's received a wonderful gift. And she says, my father gave me an amazing gift. It's more than I could have wished for. So I could have wished for, I'm imagining what was possible in the past. Let's look at the word might and how it's formed. This man has a long journey ahead of him to a hotel. He's filling up with petrol and he's thinking this petrol might get us to the hotel. In the video, we saw how might can be used for possibility. But there's a range of uses of might that we'll look at in a moment. Might, in its usual form, is like all the other modal verbs. Subject, followed by might, then the infinitive. The petrol in the car is the subject. Might, and then get is the infinitive. The petrol in the car might get us to the hotel. We can use the continuous form. In some circumstances, they might be meeting us at the hotel. And we can use might with the infinitive for present or future time. Life might exist on other planets. Well, that's the present. That's talking about possibility now. But we can say people might travel to other planets, which really means in the future. This is not about now. This is future plans. At a more advanced level, like with some of the other modals we've looked at, we can add to have and the past participle, particularly when referring to the past. Life might have existed on other planets in the past. So here we're referring to possibility in the past. In the negative form, subject followed by might not, then infinitive, or we could use mightn't, although might is not used frequently. However, it is grammatically accepted. In the question form, might there be life on other planets? Might subject infinitive. Might you not or mightn't are not commonly used as questions, so it's best to avoid those and use another way of asking your questions. Now for the basic uses of might and more advanced ones. So the main use of might is for probability, but this is with a low level of certainty. In the example, ask the teacher, they might know the answer. Because I've used might, it means I think there's a low chance that the teacher will know. It's not a very high chance when I use might. Another basic use is offering advice. You might need to ask the teacher. Here I'm giving you advice. Ask the teacher, this is a good idea. What should you do? Well, you might need to ask the teacher. Permission also can use might. Hello teacher, might I ask you about this maths problem? It's quite a formal way of making a request. At a more advanced level, we use might for logical deduction in the present and in the past. But as with could, there's a difference grammatically. With present logical deduction, might be. The train might be coming. I can hear it in the distance. So this is something happening now. So use might be. I think this is a possibility. But with the past example, the train might have left. It's not at the station. I'm at the station. I see no train. I think the train left the station before. I'm using logical deduction, so I say might have left. Might have past participle. Another advanced use is when we report speech with may. This is sometimes what we do. So if someone tells you the train may be late, now in reported speech someone might use may, but they might switch to might instead. He said the train might be late. And here are some special uses using the word might. Firstly, let's look at might as well. Might as well introduces what you are going to do instead when things don't go to plan. Have a look at the example here. Look at the lady in the picture. This is another example of someone who can't see a train. Now the problem here is the train is late. So she thinks, I don't think the train is going to arrive. And because of that, she thinks, well, what am I going to do? Well, we might as well go home. There's no point waiting. The train is so late. We don't know it's coming. So let's do something else instead. And we can summarize that meaning by saying we might as well. Another special use of might is simply saying might well. Now, this is quite different to might as well. Because if you say might well, this actually introduces something very possible. So the lady's at the station again, but this time I can hear a whistling sound in the distance. It might well be the train. I believe it's very possible that this is the train. So a big difference between might as well and might well. Another use is might have plus past participle when we are criticizing someone, similar to could have told me. The lady here is perhaps talking to someone who represents the train and she says this: I've just been told the trains aren't running today at all. You might have told me. Why didn't you tell me? That's what she means. And a final special use, again with might have and past participle, is to imagine a situation planned but no longer possible, similar to could have with this meaning. I can't go to the concert now because the train is so late. The concert might have been so good. Now, normally we used to might have and past participle representing past time, but here the event is still in the future. They're thinking about something that is to come, but the problem is something happened in the past to stop them. It's time to look at the word may. First of all, how is it formed? This is a normal day in England, and there might be a shower today. There are a lot of similarities between may and might, so I'm going to go through this section quite quickly. But there are some points where may is different to might, so pay particular attention there. The form is very similar to might. Subject may infinitive, we saw that in the video. There may be a rain shower today. Their subject may is the modal infinitive be. And again, continuous forms can follow in some circumstances. It may be raining when we arrive. And it can refer to the present or the future. It may be cold in the Arctic right now. That's talking about the present. But it may get cold in Scotland later this month is referring to the future. And again, we often use may, have and past participle to talk about past time for certain situations. In the negative form, may not. There's no such thing as mayn't. There's no contractions with may. And in the question form, may it rain later, may subject infinitive. Now, may it not is possible, so may it not rain later, but it's not frequently used. It's probably more likely to be used in a rhetorical question. The uses of may are similar to might, but there are some differences. Let's look at them now. And there's a difference in the very first one. Remember that might is used for probability, but if we use may for probability, then it means a higher level of certainty than might. So if I say she sent the postcard on Friday, so it may arrive by Monday, here with may, I've got a higher level of expectation. I'm feeling good that it will arrive by Monday. If I'd said might, then I'm thinking there's a small chance. Now I've used may, there's a much bigger chance. We also use may with offering advice. It may be wise to stay at home on Monday in case the parcel arrives. And also with permission. But here with permission, it's not just in the question, it's in the answer as well. Good afternoon, may I speak to the manager of the postal service? Yes, you may. We wouldn't say yes, you might, but yes, you may, we do. With some advanced uses, again, logical deduction in the present and in the past, and the difference here is with the may be followed by the ing form or the may have followed by the past participle. The train may be coming, the train may have left. But notice one key difference here. May can also be used to offer good wishes. May you enjoy good health this year. It's wishing someone well. It's telling them, I want the best for you. But on the other hand, you could also use it for bad wishes. May you get what you deserve for treating me so badly. So may is really saying what you hope someone will get. It could be good, it could be bad. Another advanced use of may is accepting something as true. Look at this poor person's controller for his gaming system or her gaming system. The person who did it says, I didn't mean to break your Xbox, I'm so sorry. And the girl who owns the Xbox says, that may be the case, but you still need to pay for it. So may be the case, well, I accept that that's true. If I say that may be the case, I accept it's true, but you still need to pay for it. And another use is simply for stating general truths. If you live in a place where there are eagles, then you could say eagles may be found flying nearby. And here we may mean a possibility, but we might simply be referring to what's generally true about the area. Eagles may be found flying nearby. This is something true about nearby. Let's look at one of the most common modal verbs, must. Let's start with its formation. This man is in charge of your business, so you must follow his rules. So the modal verb must is commonly associated with rules, as in the example. You must follow the rules, subject, must, infinitive. We can use the continuous form sometimes. You must be finishing by the end of the test. And must with infinitive can refer to the present or the future. So if I say visitors to the museum must take care when touching items, that's giving general advice, present. But if I say you must leave by 5 p.m, then I'm referring to the future. Must, have and past participle often, but not always, refers to the past. It must have been built over 100 years ago. In the negative form, subject, must not, infinitive, you must not touch valuable items. Or you could say mustn't. We can use the question form, must I leave by 5 p.m? but notice that other forms tend to be preferred over must for questions. Should we leave by 5 p.m? Do we have to leave by 5 p.m? It's going to be much more common than using must in the question. Let's go through the basic rules of must. Now, must is used to state rules that are required to be followed, such as people must enter the library quietly. It's a requirement. Mustn't is used for requirements containing a negative. People mustn't make noise in the library. So there is a requirement, and it's a requirement not to do something. You must not make noise. When speaking about a future obligation, use must, will have to, or have got to. So tomorrow I must go to the library. That's a future obligation on yourself. Tomorrow I have got to go to the library, or tomorrow I'll have to go to the library. Now, will have to means it will become necessary at a future time. So that's looking into the future where the necessity will come about. But in essence, it means the same thing. When someone's speaking about an obligation that has been given to you, have to is often preferred to must. So instead of saying, I must be quiet in the library, you'll often say, I have to be quiet in the library if the instruction came from someone else. You could say, I must be quiet, but that means it's your own sense of ownership of the rule. You've heard the rule and now you are putting it into practice. If you say, I have to, what you mean is someone else requires me to do it. So there is that subtle difference between the two. Where there is no obligation, use don't have to. So instead of saying we mustn't pay for books in the library, say we don't have to pay for books in the library. So here, don't have to means there's no requirement at all. If you say we mustn't, then you're not allowed to pay for the books. Do you see the difference? One is there's no rule, that's have to. And the other one is there is a rule, but the rule is not, and that's must. Let's look at the use of must for certainty. So must can be used to show certainty in the present. There must be a problem on the road. None of the cars are moving. I'm certain that this is the case. But when it comes to the past, we would use must have, followed by the past participle. They must have crashed. Look at the picture here. This happened before, not now. So we are being certain about something that happened before now in the past, must have, past participle. For negative certainty, there's a difference. Must is unusual with negative certainty or questions about certainty. Instead of saying must, we usually use can't. We wouldn't normally say they mustn't have crashed. We're probably going to say they can't have crashed. The car still looks like new. So it's logical deduction and we're certain about something. But we use can't rather than mustn't. And now must for necessity. Now, when it comes to necessity, it's very close to obligation, but a slight difference. So if something isn't a rule, but is still needed, must can also be used for this. Look at the example. I think it will help you. You must take a map with you, or you will get lost. So there's no rule to take a map, but the map is needed, and therefore we use must to indicate the need, not the obligation. If it is necessary not to do something, use mustn't. You mustn't take a heavy bag or you will get tired. Again, it's not a rule, it's just what is necessary for you to complete the task. Must can also be used to mention what should or should not be done. The other walkers mustn't expect me to be fast. This is my first time walking up a steep hill. So what's the difference between must and should here? Well, must is just a simpler way of saying that this should be the case. It just makes it stronger. For past necessity, we prefer had to instead of must. So instead of we must take good walking shoes with us on the journey yesterday, well, must doesn't have a past form. Instead, we need to use had to. We had to take good walking shoes with us on the journey yesterday. And here's something a little bit different. With negative past necessity, we often use had to not instead of mustn't. So instead of we mustn't take a heavy bag with us, we had to not take a heavy bag with us. So it makes it past because we're using had. But look at that difference in structure. Had to not. Sometimes if we give advice which is refused, we reply, if you must. Now this makes you sound annoyed, so take care with it. Let's go through this little role play. I'm going to do a parachute jump. Isn't that dangerous? Yes, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, if you must. And here, if you must indicates that the person is annoyed. They don't agree with the decision that's been made. If you must is like, well, it sounds like you've decided you're going to do it, but I don't really approve. When we say if you must followed by advice, though, it means I don't approve or if you have no other choice. If you must do a parachute jump, phone your mother first. She will want to know you are doing it. So here it may be that they don't approve, but it could also be that this person has no other choice. Maybe they are in the military for their country, and as part of doing that, they have to practice jumping out of aeroplanes. So if you must is if you have no other choice here. Must can be used for likelihood. Let's find out how. Must is also used to show high likelihood in the present. I called, but there was no answer. He must be too far away to hear me. So he must be indicates it's likely that he was too far away to hear me. So here must be likelihood. It's a likely situation. It's linked to logical deduction, but it describes likelihood. If we're doing it in the past, then you would use must have and then the past participle. They haven't arrived home yet. I expected them an hour ago. They must have got lost. It's highly likely that they got lost. We use must for encouragement. Let's look at this one. When we're using must for encouragement, we mean must for encouragement that comes from within ourselves as well as outside of ourselves. So first of all, must is used to show personal intention. For example, I must do my best in the game. That's my intention. My intention is to do my best. And by saying must, it indicates there's a kind of self-motivation going on. Must is also used to motivate others too, as I mentioned. Don't give up. We must try to win the game. So here you're encouraging the whole team if you say it like that. And when you urge someone to do something, but it isn't a rule, you can still use must. When you arrive at my town, you must visit the coffee shop. It sells incredible cakes. So I'm urging someone to do it. I'm not motivating them in the same way that I'm trying to improve their performance. I'm just saying this is a really, really good idea. And by using must, it makes it sound necessary. It gives the feeling of necessity. All you're doing is you're urging someone to do something. Another use of must is for conclusions. Must can indicate a conclusion, where you take a whole selection of information or evidence, you bring it together and you make a conclusion about it all using must. You can make conclusions in the present with must based upon evidence. The child is eating an ice cream and she is smiling. What's my evidence? Eating ice cream, she is smiling. What's your conclusion? Well, the ice cream must be nice. It must be nice is the conclusion. And in the past, must have. The child has just finished eating an ice cream and she is smiling. What's my conclusion? It must have been nice. Here's a roundup of other uses of must. Must is used where the reporting verb is past or present. Look at the two examples here. The nurse says that I must take the medicine. The nurse said that I must take the medicine, or the nurse said that I must have taken the medicine. So it doesn't matter whether the reporting verb is present, says, or past, said. Must is still used. We don't change it to something else. We don't change it to had to in this situation. Now, a question starting must you can be used to express dissatisfaction with someone's actions. Must you play music so loud? Which really means I'm not happy with what you're doing. To emphasize the importance of getting a particular message across, you could use it must be followed by an appropriate reporting verb. Not just any verb, but a verb that we may use to report someone else's information. Look at the example here. It must be stated that the plane will leave even if you are late to board. So late to board means late to join the plane, get on the plane. And the phrase it must be stated makes it more official sounded. It must be stated. It is important to say. Must is sometimes used to indicate something coming in the future that cannot be stopped. So in other words, your destiny, something that will have to happen no matter what anyone does. I don't enjoy my birthday, but I guess it must come. Our birthdays cannot be stopped. Another year will pass, you'll have another birthday. No one can stop time moving. So here must indicates the destiny. And to emphasize the fact that you have a great need to talk about something, you could say this: I must say. I must say you both look fabulous today. This is something that I feel is really important for me to speak about. I must say. After hearing something, to show surprise at what you hear or to make an exclamation, some phrases are used with you must be. For example, you must be joking. Now, we often say this when there's no joke at all, but we're just surprised or we think the information is not true. Or you must be out of your mind, or you must be tricking me. We use these simply to make an exclamation. It makes it sound like we're saying this cannot be true, but the fact is it is true. It's simply that we're making an exclamation. There's a phrase in British English, needs must, that if you live in Britain long enough, you'll hear it eventually. It means I have to do this to meet my basic living needs. What's fascinating about needs must is that it completes a clause. I don't want to work overtime, but needs must. Needs becomes a subject and must acts like the verb. We use this as a complete clause. It's a very unusual structure in English, but we do use it in British English. And we can use must as a noun. A must as a noun describes something that is completely necessary to do or have, such as climbing the hill at Sintra is a must when you go on holiday to Lisbon. A must is something necessary to do. And must have as a noun describes something that is completely necessary to have. The latest phone is a must have. It has the most powerful camera ever. It's time to look at the modal verb will. Will has so many different uses, but let's start by looking at its form. The younger lady loves the older lady, so she makes her a promise. I'll care for you when you're old. So will is generally used for the future, but not always, as we shall see. The form is the same as usual for modal verbs, subject, will, and infinitive. A slight difference here because we have a contraction that's possible. Apostrophe LL. In spoken English, just I'll. So you could say, I will care for you when you are old, or you could just say, I'll care for you. I'll represents I will. Continuous forms can follow will, such as I will be caring for you in your hardest times. Those go with particular tenses, which we'll look at later. And although will plus infinitive usually refers to the future, it can sometimes refer to the present too. I will come to your house is clearly future. That's going to happen after now. But if you say, I expect someone will be coming at this moment, that's actually present. We'll look at that as we go through the lesson. And to be more advanced, again, the past form has have and the past participle. I will have arrived by the time you get home, which is the future perfect, which again we'll cover in a moment. For the negative form, will not, but also won't. It's an irregular negative form. It's not willn't, it's won't, like this. And in the question form, will plus subject plus infinitive. Will you be here when I get back? Won't can also be used. Won't you be here when I get back? Now we're going to go into the main uses of will. There's lots of them. So the basic uses start with will as a strong request. Will you help right now? It's not perhaps you could help right now. If you say, will you help right now, there's a bit of urgency. Please do it. Also, future certainty. It will be cold this winter. This is perhaps the most common use of will, or the one that we're most familiar with. We're making a prediction for the future, but we feel a sense of certainty when you add will to it. It will be cold this winter. We talk about will being the future tense, but really it's just a more certain way of predicting the future. We could have said it might be cold this winter. That would also be a future prediction, but with less certainty. Or it may be, or it could be. All of those count as creating a future tense. But will has that extra level of certainty that makes it really good for the future. Predictions with no physical evidence go with will. And we'll see that's important in a bit, because if you do have physical evidence, you have to use another word. So your mother will be mad when she sees the mess you have made. You haven't got evidence that the mother will be mad. You're just thinking it. So use will. For promises, I will pay you once I have the money. Promises go with will. It's kind of suggesting that there's certainty about it. And with offers, don't worry, I'll help you. Usually when we make an offer in the moment of speaking or thinking, or in the moment of need, use will or the apostrophe LL. And for intentions, which could also come across as being unplanned decisions. The judgment is unfair. I will appeal against the court's decision. This is an intention, but it was unplanned, and that's key again. So before we go further, we mentioned that unplanned decisions and predicting without evidence uses will. What about if you have pre-planned decisions or predictions that do come from evidence? Well, in that case, use going to. So I will protest against the decision. Well, you will say will in the moment of making that decision because it was unplanned. But if you report that next day, you'll say, I'm going to protest the decision, because this time you're talking about something that was pre-planned. So on the moment, will. After that moment, the decision switched to going to. Predicting from evidence. If you're driving a car, you see a big black cloud, you think it's going to rain, then in that case you say it's going to rain because I'm looking at physical evidence that tells me it will happen. Let's move on to other uses of will. The future continuous. She will be running in the marathon at this time tomorrow. So here, will be, followed by the ing form of the verb, indicates an activity that will be in progress at a particular time in the future. Also future perfect. She will have finished the marathon by the end of tomorrow. Here we're looking at a time in the future and we're thinking what will be completed by that time. And we use the future perfect. Will have finished here. With refusals, we can use will. I won't, so that's the negative form, I won't jump out of the plane. I'm far too scared. I won't. I refuse. And if you're talking about inability, one possibility, particularly if it's with things that are not to do with people, machines or mechanisms that should work but don't, then you can also use won't here. I've tried everything, but this computer won't work. It's not able to work. It's not functioning. Let's go on to some more advanced uses. If you are threatening people, perhaps you shouldn't do this, but you may hear someone else do it. Don't get in my way. I'll call security if you do. So it's kind of a conditional form. I'll do this if you do that. It's used as a threat. Expectations of what you think people know. Read this carefully. You will have noticed that I'm wearing a pink ribbon. This is in memory of people who have suffered from cancer. Will have noticed. Now, this really means that you expect that they notice this before the time of speaking. It's like the present perfect. It's my expectation of what you know. I expect you know this. You will have noticed. So it's interesting there. Will have noticed. We think that that may be the future perfect, to do with a time in the future where something's completed before then. But we do also use it in this way when we expect that someone has come to know something and we say what we expect they know. you will have seen this, for example. With annoying behaviour, sometimes people will use will. Oh, he will interfere in our games. He's annoying us. He will do it over and over again. And sometimes if we're just describing typical behaviour, don't ask her to come out after dinner. She'll always watch her favourite programme at that time. Not necessarily annoyance here, just a description of what is a common habit. And the will emphasises that this person's intention or way of being is to do something over and over and over again. It's not the only way, of course, we can describe habits, but it's a way that we can say this is their typical behaviour. It's characteristic of them. In questions, won't can really mean please. As follows. I have to go. Won't you stay a bit longer? Won't you stay a bit longer? What that really means is please stay a bit longer. With generally accepted truths, usually people use the present simple, but sometimes they'll use will or won't to, again, show that something is habitual. People won't read as much as they did 30 years ago. They will prefer to watch videos. So it's kind of a habit that people have. It's a generally accepted truth of a habit, of what people generally do again and again, or that is customary for a particular time or context. Now for some special uses of will. Here's a couple of unusual uses of will, but people do use them, so if you want to be a proficient learner of English, you need to know these. Firstly, will is sometimes expressing a desire as a noun. I can't run anymore, I just don't have the will to finish the race. So here the will means a desire. And also, will can soften a semi-modal of necessity. Look at the example. I'll need you to sign this form. I'll need you. It doesn't really add any more meaning to I need you to sign this form. But by saying I will, it makes it softer or more polite than just saying I need you to sign this form. I'll need you. Again, it's using time. Often when we become politer in English, we distance ourselves in time. So will shifts from the time into the present time into the future, creates that gap in time, makes it softer and more polite. Would is one of the most complex and important modal verbs of all. Let's start by looking at how it's formed. She asks her, will you go out with me tonight? The reply is polite. I would go if I wasn't so busy. So let's start with the basic form of would, which is subject would infinitive. I would go. There is also a contraction with would. I'd go is possible, apostrophe D if you're writing. It can also be used in the continuous form, and the past can be made with would, have and past participle. In the negative form, would not followed by the verb, or wouldn't followed by the verb. One of the main uses of would is for unreality. Let's look at how we do this. Are you one of those people who dreams like this? If I owned a house with a swimming pool, I would swim in it every day. Is this a real situation? No, you're just imagining it. And this is a present, unreal situation, and we use would for this reason. Also for future unreal situations. If some friends were coming to my house next week, I would invite them to swim with me. The form is exactly the same here. It's called the second conditional, where we have an if clause with the past tense in it, and then the second clause where we use would followed by infinitive to show that something is not real in the present or future. If we're looking at past unreal situations, then we'll switch to this. If I had owned a house with a swimming pool last year, I would have swum in it every day. So here we have the past perfect in the if clause, and in the second clause, would with have and then the past participle. A situation not happening in the future, but you're imagining if it was to happen, can be like this. I'm sad that we're not getting a swimming pool. I would have swum in it every day. So here we're using the would, have, past participle structure, but we're actually referring to the future. You're imagining something in the future that was going to happen, but now is not going to happen. If you're giving a reason for doing something in the present, then you can use would again like this. I want to go swimming, but I wouldn't be able to swim against the strong currents. So wouldn't here indicates the reason why I can't do something that otherwise I would. And in the past, we'd say it like this. I wanted to go swimming, but I would have been late for dinner. So here the past form again is made with would, have and past participle. If there is willingness that cannot be fulfilled for the present or future, again you can use would. I would go swimming with you, but I haven't bought my swimming costume. So would followed by the infinitive. And with I wish we can have sentences with would. I wish you would come swimming with me. Also with if only. If only you would come swimming, we'd have a great time. So here I've used the contraction we'd. We would, we apostrophe D. There are a number of reasons why would can be used for the past, and one of them is with past habits for general activities. Look at this boy here. Isn't he good tidying his room? Maybe you were like that as a child. You could say, when I was a child, I would tidy my room at the weekends. It was your habit that you did every weekend. You can't use it for individual events though. I would tidy my room yesterday. No, we wouldn't do that. You'd use the past simple in this case. Also, you can't use it for past states. I would be a tidy child. For past states, use used to or the past simple. I was a tidy child or I used to be a tidy child, but not I would be a tidy child. There are other uses of would for the past as well, such as for repeated past actions. When I was a child, I would throw balls for my dog again and again until it learned to fetch them. When I was a child, I would throw balls for my dog again and again until it learned to fetch them. Also for past willingness. He would take his mother's dog for a walk whenever she asked him. And also for criticism of past habits. That annoying dog would make the bed dirty. So here we're using would in an annoyed way, where we're criticizing the behavior of the dog. Would is a great word for making polite requests. Let's find out all about that now. Would is a very common way of making your requests more polite. So rather than say, please sit here or will you sit here, it's more polite to say, would you like to sit here? And this is one of the most important uses of would. It makes things more polite. Why is that? Because it creates time distance in the request. Will is more immediate. Would, being often the past of will, creates a time distance which makes a request less threatening. Also, because would is a word that contains unreality in it, it also creates a distance from reality. And all of those distancing techniques makes it more polite because it's less immediate and less demanding on the listener. You can also use would in the other way, which is for polite acceptance of requests. I would be delighted to sit here. More advanced, would you mind, verb, and then ing. This is when you're asking for a favour. Would you mind moving your chair so I can get past? You're asking someone to move their chair, but you're trying to be more polite with it. Also, would you mind just on its own? Now here, would you mind actually is not so polite in the request. It's a little bit stronger. Would you mind? You've trodden on my foot. Here, when you say, would you mind, what you mean is you're suggesting that someone didn't care. It's actually something to say when you're a bit angry. One use of would that's not spoken about much is its use for reasoning. Let's find out how we use it for this reason. Native speakers often use would for reasoning. Firstly, with giving advice. Now, when we think of advice, we often think of the word should or even must. But would is used a lot for advice in this structure. What's the answer? I would ask the teacher. And that really means you should ask the teacher. But by saying I would, you're saying if I were you, if I were in your position, this is what I would do. So it's giving the advice, but it makes it less direct because it's talking about it from your perspective, not saying you should do something. And at a more advanced level, you can make results or conclusions more cautious or less than certain by using would. What happened? It would appear that the cat ran up the tree and got stuck. This use of would is really common in academic or professional writing because sometimes you want to state conclusions, but you don't want to appear too confident with them because it's based on evidence that may not be 100% certain, maybe 99% certain, but not 100%. So using would makes those results a little bit more cautious. You're saying it's not absolutely 100% sure. And this is what you're saying here about the cat. It would appear that the cat ran up the tree and got stuck, but I didn't see it, so perhaps there was another way. I'm not sure what it is, but this is the most likely outcome. Also, making opinions more cautious. Should smoking be allowed on trains? I wouldn't think so. Now, really, what you're saying here is I don't think so. You don't believe smoking should be allowed on trains, but you don't want to be too direct about it. And you don't want to be coming across as if you know everything on the topic. So by saying I wouldn't think so, you've just put that little bit of distance from reality that stops it sounding like you are completely sure or you're trying to take complete ownership over the conversation. If you're talking about the result of an imagined or anticipated situation, would is also useful. For children to enjoy a train journey, you would have to ban smoking in carriages. So here, something is necessary for the children to enjoy the train journey. One thing has to happen before the other thing happens, and it's all imaginary or anticipated because it's not real at the moment. With appear or seem, we often use would. That would appear to solve the problem, rather than that appears to solve the problem. Would appear means it looks likely. And also with anticipated feelings, with phrases such as would love or would hate, you can use would to emphasize the fact that these are anticipated feelings, what you imagine will come about. I'd hate to think this rule would upset anyone. So would means I'm anticipating what's to come, and I hope that this will not happen if I'm using it in the negative way with I'd hate. If I'd love to, it would have been the other way round. I'm hoping that it will happen. And now some more on using would for will. It's important to note first that would is not always the past of will, but in many cases it is. For example, with reporting speech. If someone says to you, I will keep my promise, and then you repeat that promise to someone else, you'll probably tell the other person, she said she would keep her promise. So here, because we're reporting speech, we change the will into would. Also, note this. If you are reporting would, then there's no change. So if she said, I would be happy to help, then report this as she said she would be happy to help. In a past refusal, will becomes wouldn't. So instead of she won't take the cat to the vet, in the past it was she wouldn't take the cat to the vet. And if you're being specific as well, we still use would in this case. She wouldn't take the cat to the vet yesterday. With in order that or so that, to explain why someone does something, would is commonly used in that structure. I gave you a lift so that you would be able to get to the vets on time. So that you would. It's a structure that we often use where will is replaced. If we said it in the future, it would have been like this. I will give you a lift so that you will be able to get to the vets on time. So here we're shifting will back in time, so we replace the will with would. If we're talking about the future in the past, then we use would. So imagine something coming after the present time in a story. So we're talking about a past story here. Imagine that the present time in the story is perhaps last Monday. She left the vets on Monday. So it's a past story. We're talking about Monday, but the specific time we're interested, that's what I mean by present time here, the specific time we're interested in is Monday. But then we know something is in the future after Monday that's worth reporting within the story. How do we do that? We can use will. She left the vets on Monday, that's the time of my story, but she would return on Tuesday because her cat would become ill again. What's the effect here? Well, we're adding extra information whilst keeping the time of the story at Monday. It's like we're looking forward from Monday in the time of the story to the future. And here we use would. It's the opposite of the past perfect. If we had the time of the story as Monday, but then we introduce something the day before, we'd use the past perfect. But with the story on Monday, introducing something the day after, use would for future in the past. It's really talking about the future, but it's replacing will with would because we're still within a past situation. Note that the past simple progresses time in the story. So if I use the past simple, she left the vets on Monday, she returned on Tuesday. If I say she returned on Tuesday, so the past simple, then I'm making time progress in the story. I'm taking the listener on to Tuesday. But with would, I stay at the previous time of the story, Monday, and look ahead to a future event, Tuesday. And here are some special phrases where we use would. First of all, the difference between would prefer and would rather. They both have similar meanings, but the grammar afterwards is different. With would prefer, you need to have to plus infinitive afterwards, whereas would rather just has the infinitive. What would you like to watch? I would prefer to watch a nature documentary. But with would rather, she'd rather watch the latest movie. So slight differences in structure, even though the same meaning according to the words that come after. If you use the object, then use the past simple after that. He'd rather you told him what the choices are. So he would rather, then the object is you, and then after that we switch into the past tense. Told him what the choices are. Another special phrase is with would you believe it? Would you believe it? The internet has just gone down and now we can't watch anything. And this is simply an exclamation of surprise. Would you believe it? It doesn't seem real. Also, as luck would have it. As luck would have it, Joanne was able to get 5G reception on her tablet. As luck would have it. So this is where something happens where you think you're lucky. Something good happens. It could possibly be bad luck too, where something bad happens. Something happens that wasn't expected and was either unexpectedly in a good way or unexpectedly in a bad way, as luck would have it. How would you like your coffee? With milk but no sugar, please. This means, in what way would you prefer something? How would you like? And would sooner. I would sooner have tea than have coffee with no milk. Would sooner means I prefer. Would be is an adjective that means hoping to be. This person here is pretending to be something that he's not. He's not a professional actor. He's just a would-be performer from a local school. He looks professional, but actually he's just a would-be. He's trying to become that. Shall is one of the least used modal verbs in English, but it is still used and you need to know how. Let's start by looking at the form. These two ladies are making arrangements, and at the end of the conversation, one of them says, "I shall see you tonight." So the form of shall is the same as with other modal verbs. Subject, then modal, then infinitive. I shall see you tonight. The continuous forms can be used with shall, and it usually refers to the future. We don't often use it in the present. With the past, shall have past participle. In the negative form, shall not followed by the infinitive, but there is an irregular contraction here. Shan't. I shan't go out tonight. SHAN''T. In the question form, shall goes at the beginning. Shall we meet at the cafe on the corner? Shall subject infinitive. And we can also use shan't in the negative form. Now for the uses of shall. A lot of the uses of shall are similar to will, but not all the uses of will translate to shall. We can use shall for future intentions. We shall visit our aunt and uncle tomorrow. Or future predictions. We shall complete this puzzle tonight if we keep going at this rate. Polite offers. Shall we give you some assistance? Indication of requirements. Everyone shall leave the area immediately. It's too dangerous to stay. This one is slightly different to will, where we're indicating a requirement. We're unlikely to use will, but sometimes we might use shall simply to make an instruction appear a bit more formal. So shall is generally a more formal and less used version of will. Will is probably used 10 times more than shall in English. We can also use it in the same way as will for the future continuous. She shall be running in the marathon at this time tomorrow. Or the future perfect. She shall have finished the marathon by the end of tomorrow. And also in refusals. I shan't jump out of the plane. I'm far too scared. And for threats. Don't get in my way. I shall call security if you do. So with all of these uses, it's the same as will. It simply replaces will. More advanced. If we're checking for advice in questions, we can use shall, and here we would not use will. So this is another difference. Shall we take off our shoes before we enter? Shall is asking for advice. Will is probably not going to be used here. Will we take off our shoes before we enter? It's kind of asking someone to predict whether we do it or not. But shall is linked to should here, to do with advice. Also making instructions sound more official. When you arrive at the king's palace, you shall take off your shoes. And here shall really means you are expected to. Should is another really important modal verb. You need to know how to use this well. Let's start by looking at the form. This lady has received a present. It's a wonderful present. And the man next to her says, you should say thank you. So should is another important modal with many uses. The most common is for advice, but there are others. With the form, as usual, subject should infinitive. So for example, you should thank her. You, the subject, should, and then thank is the verb. We can use it with the continuous form, and it can refer to the present and the future. For example, people should be grateful for their food. This is talking in general. People should always be grateful for their food in any situation, but it can also refer to the future if it's being specific about a future time. You should arrive on time tonight. In the past, we would use should, have and past participle. You should have gone to see a doctor about your illness. But as with some other modal verbs, there are some exceptions where should, have, past participle may not refer to the past as well, which we'll look at in a moment. In the negative form, should not or shouldn't as a contraction. When we're talking about the past, the negative can be should not have, or it can be shouldn't, followed by the past participle. In the question form, should goes at the beginning with subject infinitive. Should we come in? Shouldn't can make the negative, but we can also say should subject not. Should we not come in? And there's a slight difference in meaning here. Shouldn't we come in is often used when you expect that really you should come in. You're saying, isn't there something wrong here? It really is a situation that we should come in. We'd often use the contraction for this actual meaning. So it looks like we're saying, should we not? But actually it means, should we come in? Shouldn't we come in? I thought it was right that we come in. Different to should we not come in. Should we not come in? Here it genuinely is suggesting or asking if the advice is not to do something. There's a wide variety of uses for should. Let's find out what they are. So the most common use of should is for advice and suggestions, such as you should stop smoking, it's bad for you. So should indicates I have advice for you and this is my advice. It can also be used for what is desirable. I think our next car should be red. I'm not really giving advice here, I'm just saying what is desirable. Also, should can form an obligation. Children should not play ball games on the grass. Why should instead of must here? Well, here we're not being so direct by using should. It is an obligation. We are saying this is the correct thing to do, but must is a much more direct, definite rule where the should is indicating that this is the proper thing to do. And we can extend this further and use should for saying the right thing to do when it's not an obligation as well. We should tell the hotel that we broke the shower. It would be wrong to deny it. Here it's not an obligation, but we're still saying it's the right thing to do. When we talk about something being a good idea for the past but didn't happen, we can use should for that as well. I should have started learning English when I was younger. I'd be fluent now. So here, should have started is what would have been a good idea in the past, but it didn't happen. So should indicates behaviour that I wish I'd taken, but I didn't. Also, something that did happen, but was not a good idea. And here we use the negative, shouldn't. I shouldn't have spent so much time doing nothing. Now I'm poor. Doing nothing did happen. What happened when I was younger? Nothing. I did nothing. It was not a good idea. So shouldn't indicates a negative perception of something that did happen. And we could also use it with things likely to happen. The shower isn't working, but it should be fixed by 6 p.m. It's likely that the shower will be fixed by that time. With conditionals, we may use should to say what is expected in the situation. If you're cold, you should put a coat on. With planned time of events, what time does the football match start? It should start at 3 p.m. So should is telling us there is a plan. The plan is to start at 3 p.m. It should start at 3 p.m. because of the plan. This could also refer to previously planned time, not just future planned time. It should have started at 2 p.m, but it has been delayed because of the bad traffic. So there was a previous plan for it to start at 2 p.m. That's now passed, and the present situation is it has been delayed because of the bad traffic. When you're commenting on people's actions, we can sometimes use good as well. It's good that people should be so generous. So should be here is introducing the actions of the people. It's good that people should be. What are the actions? So generous. Also when expressing thanks. Thank you for the lovely gift. You shouldn't have gone to so much trouble. So here, you shouldn't have gone to so much trouble is really a phrase meaning, thank you very much, I appreciate what you did. In conditionals, when something probably won't happen, but just in case, you can use should. I don't think there's any food left in the fridge, but if you should find some, you can eat it. So why didn't I just say if you find some? If you should find some means just in case. The first clause means I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think you'll find food. The second clause is, but in case you do find some, I'm not expecting you, but in the situation where I'm wrong, if you should find some, you can eat it. So should here is added to indicate the lack of expectancy, but the admission there is a possibility. And this could also be inverted in the conditional. Should you find some food, you can eat it. Finally, it's an alternative to would in second conditionals if you're trying to be more formal. Even if I don't make much money this month, I should be grateful for what I do make. And should kind of puts an advice on myself, telling me this is how I need to feel. Instead of saying would, which is much more neutral. If you say I would be grateful, then you're predicting your response. If you say I should be grateful, I'm predicting my response, but also in a sense of this would be the right way to respond. And now for a group of words that we call semi-modals, because sometimes they have features of modals, sometimes they don't. Let's study them in more detail now. The first semi-modal we're looking at is have to, and this can be used in the same way as must in many situations. However, have to is often for things imposed by someone else, whilst must is often for things imposed by the speaker. So compare these two sentences for obligation. You must enter quietly. The rules state that you have to enter quietly. So you must, the instruction comes from the speaker. You have to, the instruction comes from somewhere external, perhaps a set of rules. Now, you don't have to follow this, but it's definitely a trend that people tend to use. They tend to use must more when the obligation comes from themselves and have to when the obligation comes from somewhere else. Therefore, by saying, I have to go, imagine you have to leave a meeting or you have to leave a class or you have to leave some event. If you say, I have to go, it sounds as if something else is forcing you to go. If you say, I must go, it could sound like your own decision. So if you want to make it easier for you to leave somewhere, it's probably better to say, I have to go, because it makes it sound like you've got no choice. I've got no choice. I have to go. But if you say, I must go, it sounds more like it's your own decision, which makes it seem a little bit more direct. It's probably better if you say, oh, I have to go because of this other reason. Now let's look at the negative of have to, because this has the opposite meaning to must. Mustn't means there is a rule not to. Don't have to means no rule exists. So you mustn't enter before 5 p.m. means don't enter. But you don't have to pay after 5 p.m. means no requirement. There's no requirement for the rule. The following meanings of have to are similar to must. For recommendations, you have to visit the maze. It's amazing. So have to, strong recommendation. I could have used must as well. Also for present certainty, there has to be a way out of this maze. I could have said there must be a way out of this maze. This means I'm certain that something is true. With need to, we tend to use that for obligation like must, but in a slightly different way. So you need to try harder. We could also have said you must try harder. We could also use it with lack of obligation. You needn't worry. It's the same as there's no need to worry. You don't need to worry. Not the same as mustn't worry. If it says you mustn't worry, there's a rule not to. If you say needn't worry, it's like saying there's no requirement to worry, like don't have to worry. And you can use it for recommendations. You need to see the incredible sights, similar to you must see the incredible sights. Now, with the negation of need, there's an important difference. With negation, need does not take tense and is followed by the infinitive, usually without to. You needn't worry, not you needn't to worry, or they need not put any more effort in, they've done enough. But we can use to sometimes, but that creates a complication because there is a difference between need not and need to not. And this is only used with not with needn't. So they need not worry. That means there is no requirement to worry. But if I say they need to not worry, then there is a requirement to not worry. They need to not worry is more like they mustn't worry. They need not worry is more like they don't have to worry. Also with need to, needn't have refers to actions in the past that were unnecessary. So if I say I needn't have tried so hard, I mean it wasn't necessary in the past to try so hard. To is not normally used in questions. So need I try harder, not need I to try harder. Now ought to. Now because ought to can be used instead of should and is so similar to should, I'm not going to go through this in so much detail. Usually, where you can use should, you can replace it with ought to. But there are a few important things to note about ought to. It's considered more formal than should. With negatives, you can form them with either ought not to or ought not. So, we ought not to interfere with the private discussion is not particularly different to saying we ought not stay out too late, where we just have the infinitive without to. Questions do not use to, though. Ought we stay out so late? We wouldn't say, ought we to stay out so late? At the end of comparative sentences, ought can be used without to. They ate a lot more food than they ought. So more food than, there's the comparative, and then we just simply finish it with than they ought. So here imagine you have should in the same position. We replace it with ought, but we can drop to in this case. We don't have to use it. And now for the semi-modal dare, which is quite complex. Dare takes on modal qualities when it becomes a negative, so I don't dare go out in the snow, or a question, dare you cross that weak bridge? I dare say is a fixed expression that means I believe with reason.